Okay. So we're going live in 3 seconds. Five, well, yeah, countdown. Well, we are going live. Well, welcome, Dr. Moses. I am so excited to have you here. Look, I'm all nervous, but in reality, I'm not. Let me not say that. But I am excited to have you here. Before we get started, what I want to do, I want to explain the 90. 90% of what we go through in life is about our past. Only 10% is about the here and now. So it makes it very necessary to understand people's 90%, hence the word behind the 90 with Nika Therapist table. So I am so happy to have you here. This is the second taping, so I'm very excited to have you here. So before we get really into the topic, because it has been an much anticipated topic, Dr. Fee. Can I call you Dr. Fee? I love that.
Yes, you can. Call me Dr. Fee.
Okay, Dr. Fee, I love that. So I want to kind of give everybody some insight how we know each other. We didn't necessarily spend time together in high school, but I knew of you. I knew your passion. I knew your drive. You're consistent in that way today. So it's nice to know that I have a relationship with someone that I've known from high school, and God saw fit to bring us together to work together in our practice. So I want to say thank you so much for being here. We don't have anybody tuning in just yet, but they'll be able to go back and understand who you are and how you came uh, to this topic, basically. Like, what made you want to talk about this? Why is this so important? So can you kind of let our viewers, our listeners know who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm a clinical mental health therapist and I have my doctorate and I wrote a dissertation on the examination of infidelity and its impact and faith and marriage in the Black church. The
Mhm.
reason I wanted to write this dissertation specifically on
Okay.
that title is because it became a major theme when I was counseling clients and couples and in personal relationships and friendships and individuals that I would meet. It was always infidelity. It was always the cheating factor. It was always this. So I wanted to just
Mm,
delve deeper into that topic. And not only that, I was hearing it also too in the Black churches. And
mm,
so, with that, I wanted to talk about the impact on faith on individuals who do go to church, who are faithful, but still find themselves on the other side of the coin. When I mean on the other side, I mean by the pain and the hurt, the betrayal, and the guilt. When you say, I
yeah,
do to each other, and someone has broken that vow, that is
yeah,
why this topic is so important to me because vows were broken.
yeah. And you don't really I think a lot of times we don't necessarily consider when you think about people in the church, you don't necessarily
Mhm,
consider the struggle just because you have your faith and you're committed to your
mhm.
faith, you're committed to one another, doesn't mean you won't have challenges. And I think sometimes
Correct.
people safeguard themselves, whether you're, in the church setting or outside of the church setting. We don't necessarily, sometimes we've got to make sure that we're mindful of safeguarding ourselves against that because we're engaging with so many different people. I remember when I was working
Mhm,
in corporate, and there was a young man. I was single. I worked at Ford through my 20s and part of my 30s. And I remember he was a married man. And he would often, if I was like at work and I was at the kitchen table, like at the office, he would come up behind me and put his hands around my waist, right? And I
mhm,
was like, this is a little uncomfortable because I knew he was a married man. And so what I did was I asked him, I'm like, if your wife was standing right here right now, would you put your hands around my waist like this? He looked, because a
mhm,
lot of times people are grooming people to kind of see how far they can get with a particular person. And so when I said that, I think
mhm,
we all have a responsibility when we see those type of things happening, when people are overstepping boundaries, we need to call it out.
mhm,
So often we don't. We just kind of like, oh, we don't want to offend anybody. But to me, you crossed the boundary. You put your hands around my waist. Now I was a single woman, but he was a married
mhm,
man. And I'm thinking, even if he wasn't single, I feel like even if he wasn't married, I think you don't touch people. But the fact that he was married, I'm thinking, you really should not be touching me. And when I said that, he wasn't offended, but he kind of took a step back. And it was just like, and he didn't say anything, but I think it caused him to pause and think about it. It's just like how you show up in relationships. If you're a married person and you're interacting with the opposite sex, you got to be sensitive to that. It's a trap.
Very sensitive. And if you really think it, and it's a trap. And when you talk about that, the term came to mind about the work husband and the work wife. That's a term that people commonly are using. And I hear this
Yeah.
in the plant culture because a lot of individuals work so closely with each other. And so when
Wow.
you think of the term wife and the term husband, these are
Yeah.
individuals in which you have personal confidences that you have intimate relations with. So when you're calling somebody your work wife and your work
Yeah.
husband, are you having intimate relations with that person? Because see, now you're taking that energy from home and now you're placing it with someone that you work together. Now, there could be some healthy and
Mhm.
unhealthy boundaries when it comes to that. I'm
Mhm.
always one that people that are married and in relationships should know each other's friends. Okay,
Ab-
that's important. Okay, absolutely, because there should never be any secrecy when it comes to anyone. And so
mhm.
when people say work wife, I often would say, well, tell me, what does that mean?
What
Because
is
the
that?
word wife should not be used in the same content with work because you're there to work, not to there to be sharing personal information that that your husband and your wife is not privy to. And so
Mhm.
sometimes when people feel that connection just through that, guess what happens? On this topic of emotional infidelity. That's
Yes.
what starts it. When
Yes.
people become so comfortable in sharing information outside of that union, outside of that committed relationship. Emotional infidelity is usually the most damaging over physical.
Yeah.
Sometimes people seem to think, oh, my spouse or my committed partner stepped outside of the relationship and it was physical, but it starts with that emotional connection
That emotional
first.
connection. And like you said, Dr. Fee, we spend so much time with people when we're working. We spend a
Yes.
lot of time with those individuals. And so sometimes we find ourselves, like you said, disclosing and sharing information that you shouldn't be sharing.
Mhm,
It could be a function of,
mhm.
you're mad at your spouse or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or what have you. And now you're sharing. And so what you're doing is like you said, you're developing these bonds and connections. And so
Mhm.
what advice would you give somebody? And like you said, they're spending most of their time at work. So it's emotional infidelity. So that's one of them. So we're going to
Yes.
list about 7 or 8, but emotional infidelity. How would you recommend a person safeguard themselves against that when you're spending so much time at work? Can you hear me?
Well, first, the person has to check themselves.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hmm.
Okay. First of all, the individual have to check themselves because if the marriage or the relationship is healthy, you can have a close bond with someone and not have any feelings at all.
Hmm.
Because sometimes people are looking for something in someone else that may not be in that marriage, in that relationship. So, when we're specifically talking about emotional infidelity, as you indicated earlier, Nika, there are 7, 8, or there are even more than that. And I'm going to touch base on some. We have emotional infidelity, right? We have physical infidelity. I'm going to explain each one of them as I go along. We have
Okay.
financial infidelity. We have object infidelity, revenge infidelity, fantasy infidelity,
Mm.
opportunistic infidelity. Okay, absolutely. So with here, the emotional infidelity, it can be described as
Right.
developing a close, intimate emotional bond with someone outside the marriage that undermines the connection with that spouse. This is
Right.
often sharing personal thoughts,
Yeah.
feelings. Confidence is typically reserved for that marital partner. So when we're
Mm.
talking about work wife and work husband, that is an example right there. And sometimes emotional infidelity is frequently viewed as the most damaging due to the intense emotional connection and
Mhm.
attachment formed with someone outside of that relationship. So we have to be careful that when we're meeting people and we're getting closer to someone, we have to check these feelings. What are we feeling with this person? Because sometimes when you are taking that energy away from the relationship and now replacing it with someone else, then it turns into something,
Oh,
excuse
yeah.
me, something more damaging. And then the physical component occurs, which is the physical infidelity, which involves participating in sexual or physical activities with someone other than the spouse or the partner. This form of contact is sexual, it is kissing, intercourse, physical, intimate interactions. So, with
Mhm.
that too, it can go even further than that with the texting. Okay,
Yeah,
with the texting, with the flirtation, with the
yeah,
pushing, with the joking.
yeah,
So when a person realizes that they have a emotional bond with somebody, they have to ask themselves, what's happening with me? What is
yeah,
happening where I'm becoming attracted to this person? What is
yeah,
happening with me not maybe possibly getting something at home where I'm feeling now that I'm deviating from my partner, but now I'm stepping into something that is more, I would say, unsafe. And the reason why I
mhm,
say it's unsafe is because you're breaking that bond. You're breaking that harmony. You're breaking that autonomy. You're breaking that balance when you
right,
say, I do. When you say I do to your partner, you're not saying I do to each other. You're saying I do to also to God. You're also saying I do to the minister that is performing the ceremony. You're also saying I do to the witnesses that are sitting there. And when you say I do, you're saying that this is in completion. You are my partner. You
mhm,
are my person. And I'm going to
yeah.
give my
Well, let me
all to you. When people
yeah.
break that, mhm,
What I want to ask you though, you touched on something. I want to make sure our viewers really take this part in. I feel, would you say that it's important that people really check them? Because you mentioned checking themselves. Let's say you're not happy with your partner, right? And I think it makes you more vulnerable. If you're not happy with your partner, it makes you, what you say, it makes you more vulnerable to these type of interactions with somebody else. And so checking yourself and asking yourself, like, where do you stand in your existing relationship? Because if you're in a vulnerable place and somebody else is telling you what you want to hear, and you kind of get sucked into that. So how would you what advice would you give somebody that's probably not getting what they need at home, and they find themselves getting what they need with somebody at work? What kind of advice would you give that person?
communication, communication is key.
Mhm.
Communication is key in any relationship. There should not be a reason really a person should not go to their partner or their spouse and say, there are some needs that are unmet. And how can we come to some understanding? Because typically, if a need is unmet, they will step outside of the relationship. But also, too, Nika,
Right.
sometimes people, their needs are met, but then again, too, they still want to just still cross over that boundary because they're curious about the person they're working with. They're
Mhm.
curious about the person they're engaging with. Sometimes people want spice. Sometimes people want different. And sometimes, if that relationship or marriage at home is just that, if they feel like it's old and there is no excitement to it, they're going to look elsewhere for someone to feel that need maybe the partner has not. I know I've been in my marriage for 30 years, and there is nothing I cannot tell my husband. There's nothing he cannot tell me. I have worked alongside many men in my life, and
Yeah.
neither have they ever attracted me, and neither was I attracted to them. Because you know why? Because I'm confident in who I am. When something doesn't feel right at home, I'm going to talk to make sure that he has the right to make it right. That is why sometimes people, they cross those boundaries because they don't want to make it right. They want to be able to have the wife at home, the husband at home, and also to form this secret relationship that
Mhm.
can have moral and legal consequences in the end. People sometimes don't think about that because when you're hurting somebody's heart, you're hurting that in-law heart, you're hurting the best friend that's related to that couple, also the community that is involved. So it's just not the couple or the person, it's the people that is connected to them as well.
Yeah, so when you talk about the emotional and the physical, that's more overt, right? But like you said, there are some subtle
Yes.
infidelity that I want to touch on, and we can kind of go back and forth. And if you just joined us, we're talking to Dr. Fee, and we're talking about infidelity and the seven different types of infidelity that couples miss. And we want to make sure you're safeguarding your relationship and not uh, fall into those traps. Can you talk about cyber infidelity? I had never heard that before, Dr. Fee. What is cyber infidelity?
Mhm. Cyber infidelity involves engaging in online transactions and interactions with individuals that's not their spouse or partner and explicit conversations. Okay.
Mm,
I'm saying the term explicit because somebody is looking for something to, again, I keep saying feel the need, but they're looking for something to keep secret. They want to form something that makes them feel whole. And also, too, cyber infidelity also includes sharing of images of each other. Also,
mm,
to being on dating platforms and having, yes, also
mm.
to having false identities where the spouse is unaware that their partner or spouse is on these dating apps.
So
And
sorry.
also too form these, that's okay, form these romantic connections via these digital platforms because they feel that the partner would never know. I always tell people we're born with intuitions. And we need to follow that intuition because that intuition is the pathway to say something is not right. So that is the cyber infidelity part, is that people hide behind these digital platforms to do what it is that they want to do, including pornography. Pornography is one. That is a cyber infidelity because if a person is addicted to something and they feel as though that the pornography part can feel a void and the partner cannot, that's a problem. And that's why it falls up under the cyber infidelity too.
Yeah, you like you said, it's so easy though. It's so easy to fall into that. You have so many people, these dating sites. It makes it very convenient for people who want to hide an affair to do it in a way that's, like you said, it's hidden, cyber infidelity.
Yes.
This is happening so much. Like I said, I see so often. It's like almost like a cry for help. They don't necessarily want to be totally exposed, but it's definitely a way for people to hide, what they're doing from their spouse, and it's happening all too often. And a lot of people, you don't necessarily get help because it's not exposed. You can hide behind the computer, the phone, or the text
Hmm.
messages, and you don't necessarily have to be exposed. And for some people, that's enough. They just want that attention. They don't want the physical. They don't want the emotional. It's almost like a game to some people. It's like, what can I get away with? And so, like you said, when you
Hmm.
are cheating through a
Hmm.
computer, through the phone, you can go along. I would think that you can get away with that a lot longer because it is kind of hidden, and it's convenient. You can be on your phone, like we're all on our phones all the time, so you can really
Hmm.
be on your phone, and your spouse has no way of knowing that it's happening. And so I think that's happening all too often, and it's sad. It's really sad that people cannot communicate to their spouse, because sometimes when you think about it, Dr.
I.
Fee, people are not
Mhm.
always unhappy in their relationships. They're happy in their relationships and still want more. Sometimes people are just not content with what they have right in front of them. Sometimes people think the grass is greener on the other side, and they're always wanting more. And sometimes I don't understand that. The people don't have the ability to lock into one person and feel the need to just, spread themselves to more than one person, which I'll never understand that. So why do people get married if you have this weakness to want more than you're supposed to have, if you will?
That's right. And that's the reason I believe in premarital counseling, because
Mhm.
sometimes people need that guidance to understand what life is going to look like when you say I do. Often enough, I don't hear in premarital counseling that people talk about infidelity. And I think that should be something that should be discussed. That if a spouse were to step outside marriage, how would you feel? What's your communication styles? How
Mhm.
would you navigate and work through it? Instead of maybe talking about the roles of the husband and the wife and those things, talk about infidelity, because these things can happen and they are happening to a lot of people. Some
Yeah,
people remain together, some people have divorced. In my dissertation, and talking to 50 different participants, 26 out of the 50 have stayed together, and most of them were separated or divorced because of these variety of different reasons. And it was
yeah,
very striking. And when I interviewed a pastor and that pastor's ex spouse, it was interesting to find out why and how that particular pastor fell from grace, and
wow,
how the church and the congregation was impacted and affected by the separation of that union. And so, yes, it can even happen to our leaders. And this is something that I definitely want to say, is that if it can happen to some of our leaders and the congregation can respect and forgive,
mhm,
how is it that some people can't even forgive their spouse? People have to learn and work through and understand not just the why, but also to understand who they are to each other.
yeah. I would agree. Like you said, when you have, a person of the cloth who falls from grace, and I think so often people don't realize they're human. They're spending a lot of time counseling people and, being there for other people, but they have their own internal struggles. And, so I'm not making it okay, but it makes sense that it can happen to them too. And so often we want to look at these leaders, whether you're a person, in church or politics or what have you, we all have weaknesses and struggles, but sometimes we don't want to admit those struggles. And it's so important to acknowledge it. And that's when people start making those type of mistakes, because you have to feel something before the actual act, right? And so are we not holding ourselves accountable to be what we need to be for our partners, for ourselves, for our children? Because like you said, it doesn't just hurt that that spouse, said spouse, it hurts your children. It hurts, like you said, if you're a pastor, it hurts your congregation, because they're looking to you for direction. And when a person falls from grace, if you will, it really does cause you to scratch your head and
Mm-hmm.
say, you know what, they're human. They have these struggles as well. But what are some
Mm-hmm.
things that, as a pastor, in your research, what was some of the struggles that you found? What were the things that they struggled with? Like, how did, if you can share that, like, how did they get to a place where they were unfaithful in their marriage?
Repeat the last part of the question because it kind of went out.
Like, what were some of the struggles, like, for the in your dissertation, when you interviewed couples within the Black church when they had affairs? What was the struggles? I mean, did they talk about the struggles that led them to being in an affair? I'm sorry, do you hear me, Dr. Fee?
Absolutely. In this particular situation, pastors and their first ladies are very close to a lot of member of their clergy,
Mhm.
and in this particular situation, it was the situation that was presented. Someone that worked very closely to this individual, and a relationship was formed. And with that relationship, it was discovered from another person that was on the staff. And with that, this particular individual came before the church and apologized along with their spouse, but it was too much of that church for a lot of people, because some people felt as though if I can't come to the church and get what I need, but the clergy person of the cloth are also too doing some things, having certain behaviors outside of the church like any other person would, then individuals will stop coming to church. So with that, the dissertation with this particular couple also to discuss that it was the pressures of trying to be perfect to the congregation, knowing that this individual had some hidden imperfections that needed to be dealt with. And because of that, this particular couple just continued on as though nothing was wrong. And with that, it crept into their home and it damaged the relationship with their children. And now with that particular individual had to leave the church. And so what I'm saying is that if as congregants, including myself, if I were to attend a church and something like that happened, yes, I have a forgiving heart, but also too, how can we again can forgive individuals in the church that may have fell from grace on this topic, and we can't work through our own transgression in our own marriages and relationships. Sometimes I find that very confusing.
Yeah. And it goes back to the title of my therapist table, Behind the 90. Understanding the 90%, like you said, sometimes people are they're overwhelmed, they're helping everybody, and they're not paying attention to the details. And so understanding this, that 90% is the person's story. And not that we're condoning bad behavior, but understanding how did you get there, understanding the 90, which is, like I said, the story. How did you get to a place? How did a person get to a place? Because it's always a starting point to whatever we do, right? And so you see it just doesn't happen. Sometimes it just happens, but there's always a starting point. It's the, over complimenting, it's the touching, it's the texting inappropriate times, like, pastor or first lady, I need you, can you help me with this, or what have you. And so it's understanding, paying attention to the details, like how did this start. And so safeguarding yourself from those traps, like when does it start, whether you, like I said, whether you're outside of the church, in the church, understanding the starting point of something happening. Like when I deal, like you said, like I work with men too, but I make sure that I'm not texting, if there's professionally, I'm not texting you at a certain period of time. The conversations stay business. So you gotta, because it can happen to the best of us, right? So you gotta make sure those boundaries are in place. So yeah. Can you hear me, Dr. Fee?
Absolutely. And sometimes it starts with just, I sure can.
Okay.
Sometimes it starts with just a simple of paying attention. Sometimes people need validation. And when they need validation of something, guess what? That's the beginning point. When, there was a particular participant of this study discussed their infidelity and how it led to a divorce. They did it because they wanted to. They knew that they could. They knew the type of individual their partner was. It was until it was a particular message that came across
Mhm.
out of curiosity. The
Mhm.
spouse went through the phone and saw a plethora of images, hidden folders on the phone, hidden photos on the phone that was secretly concealed. And it began a rabbit hole of feelings,
Yeah.
betrayal, lies, loneliness, guiltiness, emptiness, rage, anger. Most of these emotions that will come from something like that.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about infidelity, infidelity is understanding that two individuals that love each other should never get to that point. And this is so important, especially seeing couples, right? Meeting
Mhm.
with couples and clients or anybody that I know. There's always a reason. And sometimes what I've learned, and it's also true in my dissertation, is that the offender blames the offended, try to make them to be the victim. You're the reason why I did.
Oh my
If
God.
you had done this, if you
Wow.
had said this, if you dressed this way, if you had lost weight, all these things where they find these things in other people. But make no mistake about it, this individual said it plainly. I did it because I wanted to, and I
Absolutely
knew that I could.
could. So sometimes you get so just the whole risk factor of it all, the risk factor of, you know what, if I do this, if anyone's going to find out, the risk factor is low because maybe that person has gotten away with it for some time, right? So it's just like you don't really feel like there's a real risk involved because guess what? Everybody look up to me. No,
Mm-hmm.
people, it's just like people because sometimes esteem the pastors and the first ladies too much. They kind of treat them as gods. And so when you think about for some pastors and first ladies, because they're
Mm-hmm.
esteemed so much, and not to say that they shouldn't be given respect, but because they're esteemed so much, their risk factors are low. So they sometimes, in some cases, engage in behaviors that they shouldn't because they have gotten away with it before. So the risk factor is low. So they're not necessarily really concerned with it being exposed. Or if it is exposed, I'll be forgiven and people will move on because of how people see me and how people feel about me. People will just forgive me. And so I think that's a dangerous way to process things. Like you, I feel like when you get into a relationship, you got to take responsibility and accountability for your actions and to say, I did these things because you made me do it. I think that has to be so heart wrenching when somebody does something so devastating and they break those vows for them not to take responsibility for their actions. Like, how do you repair a relationship or how do you change yourself if you're not taking responsibility for your actions? So in this case where you were saying, if you had lost weight, if you wasn't you could be doing something very egregious to your partner, it still doesn't give you a right to cheat on them. If you want to leave, but don't cheat.
Mm-hmm. 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 And I think this is becoming just way too accepted, to be honest with you, in
Mhm.
today's society. I'm hearing that this person did this, this person cheated, this person had an extramarital affair. So where are our people to say what you're doing, the behavior that led to it is wrong? Where are better if this person is doing this
Mhm.
to you? Where are our all I know is that I have a very strong support system, and my support system will step in a heartbeat and say, well, Felicia, what happened? What could have led to this? So what I'm saying is that our grandparents and people of old, we need those individuals to step in and be able to say, okay, son, okay, daughter, all right, this here is unacceptable behavior. But as
That's
long as we have individuals that
right.
accept it, then this is going to continue on for generations and generations.
Yes. Okay, so we've talked about emotional infidelity, we've talked about physical infidelity, we've talked about cyber infidelity. Can we talk about financial infidelity? When we briefly talked about this, Dr. Fee, I
Yes,
had never
financial
thought about
infidelity.
that. Go ahead.
Financial infidelity are hidden accounts. Hidden accounts that the spouse or the committed partner is not aware of. Okay. That right there, that's why I tell people that before you get married, make sure each of you know where the accounts are. Because when you hide assets from your partner, that is considered financial infidelity. That because the partner has no knowledge that you have a secret account somewhere. That secret account could be taking care of another family. That secret account somewhere could be paying child support that that partner does not know about. That secret account could be also too allowing this behavior to continue, like hotel stays, vacations, because the spouse is not.
Yeah. I think we're having a little bad
And
connection.
so also too, it also includes gambling behavior. Yeah, we are tonight. Absolutely. And I hope that the viewers, when they do view this back, that they still can put the pieces together from today's show, because
Yeah.
this topic
Yeah.
here is a fiery topic that a lot of people would
Yeah. It's just the internet. I
so to
mean,
our viewers that are chiming in, yeah,
yeah. And I do it, like I
yes.
said, with
So
the internet.
when we're talking about, I'm going.
Yeah. It's just
Thank
the
you, Nika.
connection is
Thank
bad. Just a little
you
bit.
so much. Yeah, it is. It is. And this is something that I know that I wanted to really discuss. And you know what? This is where the devil is busy, because this is a topic that everybody was interested in tonight, Nika. So we're
Yeah.
going to still just keep it moving no matter what. No matter
That's
what. And then also, too, our viewers know where to find us, right? We're going to keep it moving.
right. That's right. We're gonna
So,
keep
with the financial infidelity, we're going to move to the top. Yep, the topic of revenge infidelity.
okay.
Revenge infidelity refers to a situation where one partner in a relationship engages or retribution against the other partner.
Yeah. Dr. Fee, can you repeat that, please?
Yes, absolutely.
Revenge.
Revenge infidelity refers to a situation where one partner in a relationship engages in infidelity as a form of retaliation or retribution against the other partner.
So, so
That's
basic.
really common as well.
Okay. Revenge. So, what about? Can you give me an example of revenge infidelity? It's you probably gave it to me, but with the internet, I tell you, you're right. The devil is busy. Are you there, Dr. Fee? Yeah. We're gonna
What it is that when a partner or spouse has
okay.
committed infidelity, the other person feels, I want to get revenge. I want to
Got it.
get revenge against my partner. I want to get revenge
Mm.
against my spouse. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they intentionally do this to hurt the spouse that committed the infidelity act in the first place.
Okay. Wow. So because you did it,
That's what it
I'm gonna do it.
is.
I'm gonna make you
Yes, that's
hurt
exactly
like you
what
hurt
it
me.
is.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So the cycle just continues.
Mm-hmm.
Cycle continues. I want you to
Mm-hmm.
bleed like I bled.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's
Mm-hmm.
instead of just stopping
That's
it.
right.
Yeah. What about fantasy infidelity? You hear me, Dr. Fee? Yeah, for those that are tuning in, like I said, you're gonna watch this recorded copy back.
Fantasy infidelity happens when a person.
Yeah. We apologize for the
Absolutely. And everyone, I want to just say thank you for your. Yes, yes, we apologize for the interruptions of our internet tonight. And if we need to retape Nika at some point, well, that's what we'll do.
we'll
And I'm
do.
down for that if you want to.
I do. I would like to. We'll probably have to because it's such good information. And I realize that it's going in and out. Every main great point that you make, we can't hear it. And so, but it's okay. It's okay. But we're gonna keep going down the line, and we're gonna work it out. Can you hear me, Dr. Fee? Can you hear me?
Well, I can.
Okay.
The fantasy infidelity refers to when a person in a committed relationship romantically fantasize about someone other than their partner.
Okay.
Scenarios with real people,
Ooh,
friends, colleagues, celebrity, fictional characters. That's what
yeah.
fantasy infidelity is. This type of fantasy does not always involve physical or direct emotional affairs. However, it can lead to feelings of being betrayed and feeling guilty for doing so. So that's what fantasy infidelity is.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. I can imagine that a lot of people, can be guilty of that if you're not careful. When you see somebody, and so that's why it's important. I think a lot of times people, I've counseled people where they don't want their partners to like or comment on a person's physique, their appearance, right? Because sometimes people do that. So they see something on the screen, social media, people sometimes are half, women are half dressed, men can be half dressed. And it's so important. If you're married, it's important that you may not want to um frequent those type of platforms, because it can be very easy to fall into that trap of liking something. You got a man who has a don't have his shirt on, and he got all his muscles, bulging muscles, or a woman with her bikini, you know showing a lot of body parts. And so I think I would think for a married man or a married woman, you probably shouldn't be liking that kind of stuff. How do you feel about that? Like when people on social media, they're showing body parts, or they may look really good. How do you feel about that? Do you, as a married woman, what do you do? Do you just kind of like go by it, or do you like it, or you comment? Like, I know what the answer is, but what do you do? I just want our listeners to know, like, what do you do?
Human. Okay, listen, we're human. There has been instances where I walked past a young man that was dressed very nicely. And because I'm confident, I didn't have a problem telling that person, you sharp. Now,
Like,
handsome, but I would say you sharp. That's what I would say.
okay.
Oftentimes I try not to put myself in situations where my eye is going to go astray. Okay, I try not to entertain conversations with anyone that is going to cause my mind to wander. So, with that, if your mind wandering also to the infidelity can create in the heart. And the next thing you know, you're thinking and fantasizing about that person. And so, being married, we got to be very careful in the places that we go, relationships that we entertain, including conversations, to
That's
make sure
right.
that we clear the mind, the heart, and the soul, not to fall into that trap.
Mhm. That's some word right there. Now let's talk about opportunistic infidelity. Yeah. So what about opportunistic
Mhm. Oh,
infidelity?
yes.
That one.
Opportunistic. That that occurs, it's a deliberate intent. That's the key. Deliberate intent or ongoing dissatisfaction in the primary relationship. That's what it is. It arises when a person encounters an unexpected chance. Okay,
Mm,
that's the key word too. Unexpected chance or unplanned opportunity mhm, for
okay.
a romantic or sexual encounter. That's
Okay.
what it is.
Wow. So we have
Mhm,
emotional infidelity,
mhm.
physical, cyber,
And I'm
financial.
sure
Mhm. Yeah, we don't. Okay. Can you hear me?
object,
Yeah, object,
object,
revenge,
yep.
fantasy, and
Mhm.
opportunity. Yeah. This darn internet.
Mhm, mhm,
Yeah, that's okay though.
mhm.
Um, but if you had
I
to, like
know.
when people watch this back, I mean, because I know they're, just working out all the kinks, but we're going to continue to go on with this therapist table on into the future. The internet is not going to stop us from getting the messages out that we need to get out. That's just the way that it is. I get that, sometimes the world wide web can be unpredictable. It can cause issues, but we're going to continue to put out the information. And so what I'll do is I'll list all of these, and like I would like for us to do a do-over, because there was so much more that I wanted to discuss, and I'm sure a lot of people have questions. I don't know what it's looking like on the live end, but hopefully it's a clear picture. And we got some of the main points across. Can you hear me? Yeah. Dr. Fee, can you do me before we?
Absolutely, and I would definitely take you up on that offer, and, but I want people to.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Mhm.
go ahead.
No, I wasn't saying anything. It's seeming like we're saying. I think it's so delayed. It appears that we're talking and you're talking and I'm not talking. But no, go ahead, Dr. Fee.
So what I wanna say is that, I'm going to be having workshops on this, and I'm gonna encourage people to come to the workshop when I do have it, because there's going to be so much they can learn from about these different type of infidelities and the terms of marital affair, adultery, cheating, micro cheating, and those things, and
Mm,
how to work through these navigate treacherous waters when you're married, especially, and also too for those who've been in committed relationships for a very long time. And at your office, that I work very hard working with couples.
we do.
And this is the reason that this topic, without really understanding what is happening,
Yeah. Are you there?
without really understanding what is happening. Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's all, and I appreciate, you taking the time to actually outline the details of, what infidelity looks like, because so often people are not being sensitive to, again, the traps. How do you enter into an emotional, physical, affair, and understanding, avoiding those traps and being honest with yourself about where you stand in your relationship and talking to your spouse. I think so often we don't work towards solutions. We would rather just enter into another relationship and we repeat the same behaviors and patterns over and over again. And it's so important to understand where you stand within yourself and in your relationship so that we don't, you know, uh, enter into an affair. What are some final words you would like to give to our listeners?
Hmm.
I want them to know how to reach you, your website, your email. How can they reach you? What are some final words you would like to share, impart to our viewers? Can you hear me?
Individuals can reach me at, of course, 901 Garrison Street. I think I got the address right, Nika. In Dearborn. They can also to email me at info@counselingyourheart.com,
Mhm.
and also to contact me at 734-494-0812. When we
Mhm.
have a future retaping of tonight's show, I'm going to provide more information as to how the trauma of discovering a partner's infidelity can disrupt the person's individual sense of trust and security. Because I want to talk about these anxiety disorders, the panic, the acute stress, the post traumatic stress, the major depressive disorder, the generalized anxiety that sometimes occur because of this. And I want to be able to reserve that, Nika, at your future show. because I know we're having a little bit of delay in the video. And so, but
Yes.
I just want to encourage the listeners, the audience, to not be discouraged by tonight's show, because tonight's show is definitely a topic of interest for so many people. And we
Absolutely.
just definitely want you to hold on until we redo this again. And
Yes.
when we do, you will not be disappointed. And Nika, I'm so glad that you even had me on a guest to talk about something like this, because a lot of people like to brush this up under the rug. They don't want to confront it. They don't want to sit in the pain. They don't want to sit in their hurt. They don't want to sit in their anger. Some people become so numb to it. But if we just have open discussion and put it out there so people can begin to heal and restore their faith in themselves, their marriage, and their relationship, then guess what? This world would be a better place. But so
Yeah.
right now, infidelity is just what it is. It's happening way too much. And
Wait.
it's either it's going to take you out, or you're going to learn from it and move forward with some skills and some coping strategies. And my dissertation, yet again, everybody, I just want to discuss. The title is An Examination of Infidelity and Its Impact on Faith and Marriage in the Black Church, a qualitative study exploring the emotional, psychological, and spiritual consequences of betrayal, the role of faith in healing, and the development of coping mechanisms and resilience among Christian couples.
Yeah. That is when I say I remember when you were
So, if anyone is interested in wanting to read a few pages, I would love to send that to you.
no, is it published yet, Dr. Fee? And it's
It
probably
is
really
not published, and I'm looking I'm interested in having that done.
okay. That's very good. Well, again, thank you so much, Dr. Fee, for your
Yep,
time.
it's
I
not
don't
published yet.
not yet. Okay, not yet. Yeah, but I wanna say thank you so much for your time. I know
Mhm,
you
mhm.
the message is probably delayed, but hopefully you could hear me some. But I thank you so much for your time. I don't take for granted the time you spend on here, educating our viewers about what infidelity is so they can avoid the traps. Thank you so much for those that tuned in or wanted to tune in and they couldn't, but I hope you listen to this playback and learn something and apply it accordingly. So thank you so much. Have a good evening. And Dr. Fee, if you can stay on for just a minute, I'm going to end the stream, and then I just want to have a few I want to talk to you a little bit more. Okay.